find that something is broken and something could be restructured according to the best practices accepted in the community for Spring developers, for instance. But we also can do something different. We can, let's say, this project was given to us and we gotta do the improvements, and someone tells us what improvements they want, but it's a very high level list of things, and let's document that. Let's for instance create a directory docs, and then maybe a file with the requirements.md. And someone just tells us that we should do something like get rid of the legacy code, replace it with the corresponding new code, new implementation of the algorithm, and maybe add tests, because the project doesn't have tests right now. Let me show you. So there's just the empty folder and the generated test that was created by the project wizard. So basically there are no tests. And maybe we want to add persistence. Why not? So I would add a few high-level requirements to the project, like I call them, let's say, new features to be implemented. So that's our high-level plan for updating the project and implementing the new functionality. Probably we could have done this by letting Junie or the agent to analyze the project and come up with some suggestions, or we can start from something like this with high-level requirements, and then the next step for us would be to analyze this document and create a detailed plan. So I'm adding this. Let me zoom in a little bit. I feel like you should be able to read it better. Analyze the documents, the requirements, and create a detailed plan for the improvements in this project. And you probably have noticed, if you have given the task to Junie just to analyze or come up with some suggestions and so on, it might happen that instead of creating a report, it would actually eagerly go and implement something, and you are not ready to implement. You don't know what you're gonna implement at first. So in the recent versions, it's somehow changed. Maybe that the model got more smarter because we switched to Claude 3.7. But sometimes it tells you that it analyzed the project, but doesn't actually create the report. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So we better be explicit about our intent here and ask it to write the plan into the docs, the plan.md file. So what will happen here now is that it's going to look at the contents of this requirements document and suggest a plan how to implement these requirements based on my project. So let's run this. And it's gonna take a couple of minutes, and meanwhile, while it's running, I'm going to switch to the GitHub repository and maybe demonstrate a few things that I have done. So my first project that I consider the first one was a game. So I started building games, like the things you would never spend time on. Because it takes a while to implement them properly, and they are not so useful, right? You always have to do something more useful on your daily job. And here I have this liberty that finally some tool can just generate stuff for me while I'm drinking coffee. And I recalled this little game called Minesweeper, Windows XP times. That was fun. And this is the place where I was just experimenting with prompts. I didn't have any guidelines. I was just I collected the requirements from the internet, basically using ChatGPT, what and how the game should be doing, what should be the logic there, and collected a huge prompt and submitted it to the to Junie agent, and it generated some initial prototype, and then I iteratively was improving it, and basically in a few hours I had this working game with different modes, the medium, the advanced, the beginner. I could reset the game, I could store the high scores, and so on. So that was fun, but I didn't really experiment with any of the guidelines here. Let's go back to the ID. Is it complete? No, it's still analyzing. As you see, it analyzes the project, and it analyzes the sources. Eventually, it will come up with a plan. I hope. Yeah, we have some instability issues sometimes, so that comes from idea. But the plan is complete. As you can see, it's pretty detailed. I think 200, almost 300 lines. Let's see what's inside. So we are done. So the convex hull surface improvement plan, requirements analysis, then the implementation plan, replace legacy Java implementation with Kotlin. It tells that the legacy implementation is in those classes. Here are the tasks. Like currently, I see it's pretty detailed. It's even adding some code snippets. This is something that I didn't expect actually, that it would tell along with what to do. It actually already is saying how to do something. This is not something I expected. And the task list is pretty detailed, but it looks more like it's more like a guideline. It doesn't tell you exactly the order, although it numbers the items, but not all of the items. There was this section on like the general analysis. So it's not a task list. It's the improvements guideline. It's the plan. What I figured is that the plan might not be followed by the agent as it's written, like sequentially. Instead, if you want to raise this probability that the agent will follow the plan or the tasks as they are written in the file, I would rather have another step, which feels like a meta-programming already with the agent, but this is something I see that works for me, and I usually add another step, which feels odd, maybe, but I add another step with a follow-up instruction. Let me see if here it comes. So the instruction is to create a detailed enumerated task list according to the suggested improvements plan in the plans.md document. So it's gonna take the plan once again as an input and actually generate the task list. And the point here is that the task list will have the placeholders for marking the tasks as they are completed. This is not a built-in functionality for Junie. It kind of is in the form of this plan that it displays in the UI, but I feel like having this plan externally from the session, so this plan doesn't persist right now. This is something that the team is working on. But I would rather have the plan and the to-do items somewhere externally. And this would actually give me this tool for using or for following the plan, no matter which agent I'm using. Like, is it Junie or is it something else? I can switch the agents, I can switch the tools and so on. So, and I ask it again, not to go and implement it, but rather persist the plan, the task list into another file again. Let's see. So meanwhile, are there any questions maybe or comments or maybe suggestions? Any raised hands? I don't know how it works here. I never know to which part it will actually go. How many? Like we know that there is a limited iterations that the agent does during one workflow. So it's around 20. But maybe I want to stop earlier and how to do that. And one of the things that worked for me there is no like a hook or a special command to tell to Junie to stop here, but it feels like 9 out of 10 times this worked for me, right? So we are currently talking to a tool using the free text, and there is no special commands, and we are figuring out how can we influence its work using this kind of free text, and this seems to be working. So the next prompt I'm going to fire up here is going to be, we have some work to do. Why don't we tell it to use this file as an input and proceed implementing the improvements plan according to the tasks listed in the task.md and mark the tasks that it completed, with this marker. Again, it works 9 out of 10. It's not something that works every time for me, but it's interesting to see if this workflow will actually give any results today. Let's see. Well, it's already doing something. It's gonna take the longest, I think, from our session. We can look at the whatever it's doing and try to follow and drink some coffee here. But one thing we want to see is if it's going to synthesize its own plan the way we expect it to do it. So the preparation, so it examines the first phase. It will mark the tasks as completed. It's going to incorporate some testing and, well, obviously the implementation. But what I want to see here is if it's going to stop or not. At least there is no signs that it's going to proceed to the second phase so far, according to this plan here. So we probably can tell that it's going to stop at this point. Meanwhile, let's go back to the GitHub repository. So that was the first project I was building, and then I immediately tried building the other one, the solitaire game with Kotlin and Compose multi-platform. This one was a little trickier already. There is a lot of interaction with the cards and the rules and how they should be moving. So it took me a while to figure out how to submit the prompts in order to actually get the results. So a few evenings. But there I already came up with an idea that I should actually keep something in the guidelines. And here my perception was first like, okay, I submit the rules for the game. I described as much as I could, like what the game should be, what's the game dynamics, and so on. As you can see, there is nothing about the Kotlin style and how the program should be written, how to approach the tasks. So it's basically the requirements document, not the guidelines document. And while it worked, I feel it's not the most efficient way. I feel that the requirements for the project and what actually you want to do should be in a separate document, not in the guidelines. The guidelines.md file is for the general rules how Junie should be working with your code base, how the code should be generated, maybe the guidelines for the style, what not to do, the examples of the bad code probably, and so on. And I actually came up with some guidelines later on when implementing a MIDI visualizer. So I have like a MIDI keyboard, and I thought like it would be fun to register some MIDI events and then draw something and visualize the music somehow. So it's still in Kotlin, still with the compose. But what I figured, I better start showing. No, not this one. Sorry, like I probably. It was 2048 game. I think I have created the Kotlin guidelines for, right. So I figured that the LLM sometimes generates some funky code that I'm not willing to accept. That I see it's like a bad code. For instance, immutable data classes with getters, so like Java style data classes, and it feels odd using them in Kotlin. So whenever I saw something funky happening like this, I started adding that into the guidelines, that don't do this and do that. So I came up with some examples, and it feels like this style guide actually works better for me. We generated one in the beginning of the session, right? So we have that in the guidelines.md for this project that we are working on right now. But it's not the same. It's not. It's generated. Doesn't have any examples. It's very high level. Although it does mention that prefer using immutable structures over immutable, and so on. But as you work through your projects, I feel it's a good idea to, whenever you see a bad code example, you better somehow adjust your guidelines dynamically. Do this and don't do that. And this raises the question whether or not the guidelines.md should be editable or not. So technically, Junie can update guidelines.md file, but it doesn't do that. In my experience, it doesn't update it automatically unless you ask it to do that. So if you give it a task, like what guidelines you want to be in the file, Junie is able to generate that and add to the existing guidelines. But in my experience, it wouldn't do that automatically if you just write a prompt that I prefer functional style. It wouldn't go and update the guidelines.md automatically. You should tell it to do that. Oh, nice. See, like while working, it actually is executing the tests, and the tests are green. Let's check what is it doing there. How far with the implementation are we? Okay, instantiating the tests, running the tests, doing something, passing the tests. That's interesting. I didn't have the tests in the beginning, right? So let's take a look. What did it do? So first of all, it generated the Spring Boot test. It's not just a unit test. It's like an integration test. I generated some inputs for the algorithm, and it uses the mock MVC to submit the requests and validate the results. Nice. It's a nice simple integration test for Spring Framework. What else did it generate there? So there is a service directory that existed before. There is this new test. What's in the source code? The algorithm controller got updated. Okay, so it added the the comments. And by the way, one of the things, let me go back to the examples for a second. So in the first example that I was showing to you, building the solitaire game, if you go and look in the sources that were generated, for instance, game logic, this is like a pure code. There's not many comments. It's just like vanilla code, very, very stereo, I would say. And if you go to something that was built lately, for instance, the CRM application built with the Spring Boot again and React front end, I think if I go to the sources, let me fire up something like maybe the customer and the APIs and go to the controller. Okay. So here I don't see that many comments. So that was built using Junie when it was using Claude 3.5. And Claude 3.5 generated code did not contain that many comments. And what I have seen lately, when 3.7 integration was added, it became pretty verbose on adding the comments. So if I go back to the sources, it often adds the comments into the pretty much to any line. Sometimes the full documentation on the classes and the APIs, even with the examples of how those APIs should be used. Maybe that's a feature of Junie. I cannot confirm because I haven't checked with the team. But like in my workflows, I also have sometimes this task for the agent to document the code. So maybe that's also the side effect of this stage. What else do we have here? We have an adapter from the legacy code to the new code now. That one was generated. And did it adjust the legacy code somehow? No, it didn't. So it basically created the test, the other test. So that's the logic test. That's not the integration test. That's the normal unit test, right? Does it test for any corner cases? It seems I know the algorithm, so I can check collinear. Okay, I didn't test for the collinear points, but it feels like pretty exhaustive testing is going on here. And the integration test, that's fine. It looks like it completed the work. Did it update the task list? Let's check the MD file now. Yes, so that's the first stage, and as we expected, well, we hoped for it. It's not really expected. We hoped that after testing the initial implementation, it will actually stop after the phase 1. We could do the same for this phase 2, maybe after phase 2, and proceed with extract algorithm selection into a service. So let's see. Should we do a follow-up prompt here? Maybe, but we can actually start a new session as well, because actually that's a unit of work that we just did. Some of the users I have seen commenting it's like a feature request for Junie to be able to start the new units of work in the features branches. This is something I think we get a look at. But for me, a simple prompt also worked sometimes when I just tell it, this is what I want to do. But before starting to do it, please create a new branch, and all the new work should be done in a branch. And then it actually created the new branch. There was this command line executed, checkout branch, and then all the new code was actually submitted to that new branch. But I'm going to start the new unit of work and the new session and tell it proceed with the improvements according to the plan.md file with tasks listed in docs.txt tasks.md file in the phase 2, extract selection into a service, and mark the tasks as done upon completion. Oftentimes, if you're like just following this style of work, you start feeling that this could be part of the product itself. This could be like a standard workflow. But I realized that different people have different styles of work, have different styles of projects, have different requirements. So if this was the default behavior of Junie, what do you think? Would it be like a good thing to have some sort of or some set of predefined workflows of how things should be done, or you prefer to use Junie as an engine that you can just tailor for yourself? Currently, it's very raw. It's like an engine that you just submit the prompts to with some guidelines, and just a single standard guidelines file is this guidelines.md, where you can actually put anything. There is no like a strict format, strict rules of how to write those files as well. And if you have tried Junie and you have experimented with guidelines, tell us what have been working for you and what didn't. What like have there been any situations that you created some guidelines and it didn't go as expected? That would be nice to know as well. Let's see. So the plan is going on. There's some awesome animations. The spinners. It analyzes whatever code is doing right now. So it's gonna, check the structure of the application and see if it can restructure it. Let's see. So it's gonna implement the service in terms of the Spring Framework services. And it's going to update the algorithm controller to use this new service as well. And going to add a new endpoint for listing the available methods. Create new unit tests. Test the implementation at the very end, and it will update the tasks.md file with the for the items that it has completed. Hopefully it will work out the way we expect. We didn't start the application a single time. I just wanted to save some time for you today on the stream. If you wish to play around with this code, again, I just recall where you can find the sources. This is the project. It's public. It's very minimal. You just open, import it into the IDE, submit the prompts the way I did, and maybe you will get some interesting results. So just to summarize what is going on here. First, we started with a minimal requirements document, right? We had some high-level requirements, what we want to do with the project. Like someone studied the project and they know the functionality. They checked, okay, there is some legacy code. We want to get rid of the legacy code, like replace the legacy Java implementation with the corresponding modern Kotlin implementation. Then do some structural changes according to the best practices. Maybe follow some layered design of the application, basically preparing it for the further development. Maybe add tests because we don't have any, and then at the very end we probably want to add the persistence. So basically start adding the new functionality. And this way improve the project even further. Maybe at some point build a UI visualizing how this service works. and prepare for deployment. This is something that I haven't specified in the beginning. So we have this requirements document. We generated the plan, the improvements plan using Junie by submitting the requirements document and coming up with the detailed development plan for the service further on. This didn't turn out really well this time because it created how to do something instead of what to do. This thing I would like to avoid normally. I would then, go back a step back and tell it in the prompt that don't create the code snippets in the plan, just, list the items, what we need to do. So I normally wouldn't have this code snippets in the plan document. And then the task list is basically a distilled version of the plan on the task level, so that we would have the placeholders and we would have the order of the task execution. So as you can see, it updated the second phase. All the items now in the second phase are marked, and we stopped here. It seems to be working pretty well that, we isolate the units of work and stop whenever you want it to stop. What's up? Do we have any questions in the chat somewhere? Looks like next we could probably proceed with phase 3. So can we tell it just as a follow-up prompt this time? So not a new session, but a follow-up prompt. Proceed with the tasks in phase 3. So I'm gonna be very concise here, not revealing a lot of intent in my prompt here. So I just feel like you already know what you're doing. Please continue. And maybe it will actually have a negative effect. I don't know. But what I wanted to do with the follow-up prompt is to pay your attention to this little UI adjustment, let's call it like that, in this panel here. So number 1 and number 2. So those are like the separate prompts in the same session. So the original prompt that we started with phase 2 in this session, and the follow-up prompt is now in this second tab. It's not a final UI, of course, but I just wanted to pay your attention this little UI element that might be handy. And even for this kind of little things, we would like to hear your feedback. How does it work? Isn't it intuitive to have those switches here for the separate prompts in the same session and so on? Let us know as well. So what's going on here? It's analyzing the code again. How do you feel about this UI, by the way? The plan that sticks on the left and then the log on the right. Does it work well for you? Because I at first I thought myself that it just takes the space for me and I wouldn't use it, but I literally use it most of the time like this, like expanding it on the whole screen. And by the way, in IntelliJ, like if you feel that, okay, it's now getting in the way, but I still want it to be open. If you have multiple screens, you can actually unpin or undock this view, drag it to some other screen, have it open, see how Junie operates and see all the logs, and then continue working or exploring your project. So you would have everything open on multiple screens, and it still will be possible to use concurrently.
I think it's good, Anton. I like having more information than less. I like to be able to see the plan and then the execution upon the plan adjacent to it. So I think it was a good choice.
Perfect. Have you found any glitches in the UI? Like, is there anything that irritates maybe, or maybe I don't want to reveal my personal reactions to this. Like, I'm trying to ask the question like in a neutral way this time, because I do have some small things, some small complaints about this UI, but don't want to influence the others on this opinion.
It does quite often just sort of stop. So it'll be analyzing, or it'll be saying it's doing a Gradle build, and it just times out after a while. I think it may have trouble with multi-project Gradle builds. In particular, I haven't seen it on single project builds, but yes, just going away and then timing out. That seemed to be a thing.
I see. That's not the UI issue, of course, but yeah, I have seen this happening as well. Like some long running tests maybe, or sometimes it even tried starting because it's the Spring Boot application. It tried starting the application itself to see if it's operational, but then did not actually kill it, and either stopped, like hanged all the workflow. At least it was happening in the beginning, like maybe a month ago. But now it seems not to start the application, or if it started, at least it somehow maybe left it running, but proceeded with the other tasks that it was given. Nice. It looks like we have more tests now.
Tests are an interesting place because it seems impossible to tell it to run all the tests. So if it does a refactor, it seems to analyze what tests have passed or failed, run them individually, even though that takes 5 times as long as running all the damn tests. And there are also, talking in particular about the UI, there are times when I've been editing Gradle builds, for example, and it will say, okay, I'm editing this Gradle build. IntelliJ will then see that the Gradle build has changed. IntelliJ will try and import the Gradle build, discover that it can't. IntelliJ is showing you on the screen right now, oh, I can't do this because of this. And Junie's still chuntering away in the background saying, it's doing things, and you're screaming at it, look, right there on the screen, it's telling you, IntelliJ is telling you it can't build it. It's telling you why it can't build it.
Yeah. Like currently, so the integration with the tools, currently, when the code is generated, Junie tries to get the feedback from the tools. The tools are the compiler, the tests, and so on. And it aims to fix the red code, right? But it seems that with the tests, there is some sort of an optimization that it really doesn't run all the tests like in your project. But sometimes it does. Actually, currently, when it was running, as we have seen, it actually executed all the tests, right? But probably it executed all of them because most of them were just generated in this section, and it was actually about testing.
Yeah, but there's a difference between running every test individually and running all the tests as a batch of tests.
Exactly. So it feels like a trade-off, right? It feels like if my project is huge, let's say my tests are going to take like 30 minutes to run, and it's like an obvious optimization. I want to get the result quickly. I'm going to run only the test that is relevant, and well, it feels like a smart way to do that the tool can figure out the dependent test and run only that and proceed with the workflow. And it happened to me as well that Junie tells me that everything is good and operational and the tests are green, and then I run the whole test suite and half of them are failing, which is not great. So I feel like we should have some sort of a mode or a commands or the way to actually deterministically tell it in the guidelines that run all the tests at the end of the session. but I cannot confirm actually if it works through the guidelines. Maybe one way or another we should be able to tell it, or should somehow enforce it to do so whenever the workflow completes, run all the tests.
It seems that Gradle has a task for that, right? Gradle has check.
Yes.
And we might say, okay, look, just run. I mean, and Gradle is pretty good if we break our build up nicely. In not running tests, it doesn't have to do. So it feels to me like we should be able to run Gradle test as just our way of doing everything, and then Gradle like a quick way of getting to run all the unit tests that have changed, and Gradle check as a way of saying, okay, there's all these acceptance tests, they should always be run as a final check. Let's run check.
Okay. So one thing that seems to be working when you want some command to be run during the workflow, the same way as with Git workflow, like with Git branches, right? So if I did specify that in the command like window here, then it actually would do that, right? So if we do an experiment here, like you see the tests are passing, what if we do the following? We tell it to proceed with phase 4, proceed with the improvements in phase 4, make sure to run all the tests at the end of the session, and make sure the tests pass. Yeah, so Duncan is posting the instructions, right?
Big Ben, but yes.
Let's see how it works. Is
it okay if I just talk? It's Ben.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I went through this because I'm using, it's actually a TypeScript node project that I'm working on. And I had to tell Junie not to use the run test command, which I think is an internal action, which it uses to validate. So in my guidelines, I have the instructions I posted in the chat, which, sorry, it's got the formatting's gone a bit awry, but when I tell it I'm working on a specific package within my monorepo, it does know to run the terminal command that will just test the package that I'm working on. But equally, I can tell it to run the test for the entire project, which obviously take a bit longer, just to make sure that cross-package links don't get screwed up by changes.
So did you specify this requirement as part of the prompt or as part of the guidelines?
It's in the Junie guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I just have a section in there on testing, and the key to it was you have to use the words "very important" to give it priority. And you also have to specifically tell it not to use the run_test command, which I think is its internal preference. But I also run I use Jest as my testing framework, and that is running in watch mode all the time. So as edits are being made, I can see the tests running or failing, and passing or failing. But it's obviously not looking at the output of the of that watch process. It runs its own instance of the tests whenever it wants to validate.
Okay. So let's see, like for the next time, I'm going to add this very important part on testing. Maybe it will run the tests next time.
But I think, as Duncan was saying, you can see sometimes that it might try to run tests. Right? Before I managed to figure this trick out, it would run tests with increasing levels of focus, or sometimes with decreasing levels of focus. It would recognize that it could run a particular unit test case or or group of tests based on the name, but it would quite often just it would mangle the command. And given that the Junie output window doesn't show the commands, the actual terminal commands that are being used, it was quite confusing. And it was only, I think it was Daniel in the Discord group who suggested, through various comments from other people as well, suggested that both are very important and do not use run test. That was actually kind of the key, really, to getting it to do what I wanted it to do rather than do its own preference.
Nice. Let's see what is going on here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I'm very impressed with Junie.
And it's a separate team that is working on AI assistant, and it's a different style of work, right? The way I see it, the two tools could complement each other in various ways. With Junie, it's like you set the ship and it just sails, right, over some workflow, over the requirements, and then there is a list of requirements the way we were just experimenting here. But you take your hands off somehow, and it's autopilot basically for you. And it's a very social thing and psychological, I think. So there are different ways and different styles of working. And if I know what I'm doing, like I know what to do, and I know how it should be done, the tool should be just helping me quickly with auto completions, with minor snippets generated in a fast way, right? And if I know what I'm doing and I know what should be done and I want to keep my hands on the whole workflow, Junie is not going to help me, and the agentic workflow is not going to help me very much because it just gets in the way. Unless I really want to set it sail and just go away from the computer, right? In this case, it's nice. But in the situations when I don't know what exactly I'm doing and don't know how it should be done and don't know exactly all the steps, then agentic workflow is actually very efficient, right? I just give it the task and it runs. So I outsource a unit of work to the tool. Because sometimes the changes that Junie does, let's say some granular changes, like renaming classes, refactoring, and so on, then it feels like I could have done it faster myself with the deterministic refactoring tools in the IDE, and I would know exactly what I'm doing. So Junie doesn't give me a win, like the agentic workflow doesn't give me a win there. Let's see, the test failed. Oh, that's interesting. So what is failing? So to answer your question, is there a place? I think there is a place for both of them, especially if you start counting how much money you spend, because agentic workflows are generally more expensive, like in pure money. Like when you are fine with just with autopilot and do something else, meanwhile, I don't know, surf internets, chat with colleagues, drink some coffee, then paying for that is a good trade-off. And when you know what you are doing and be in control of what you are doing, I think AI assistant as a code completion, code generation is actually a pretty convenient thing. So there's
AI assistant could learn a lot from Junie's ability to actually make edits to files.
Right. So multi-file editing is actually coming to AI assistant. The team has been actually busy with the platform adjustments rather than the AI assistant itself. we had to put some work into the platform for implementing all those capabilities of automatically discovering the context. Currently, Junie, you don't specify the link to a file, right? You can write the file name, or even don't write a file name, and Junie somehow collects this information, makes queries to your project automatically, and you didn't tell it exactly which file to look at, it will figure it out. That's a smart way to do so, but in the AI Assistant, when it was created, we didn't have these capabilities from the platform. Now, in the next release, we have the new APIs in the platform to collect the context from the project in a smarter and faster way. So, for instance, the LLMs, when you ask the LLM to add new dependencies to your project, and you have a Gradle project, and then the LLM tells you, okay, you have a Spring Boot project, here you are, here's the dependency you need for the database support, that could be Spring Data JPA, for instance, and it prints a pom.xml snippet for you for your Gradle project. That is not so smart, isn't it? But if you tell to the LLM that you're actually using Gradle with Kotlin DSL, blah, 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 then it generates the correct thing. And this is something that I wouldn't like to specify myself. You are a smart tool. Why aren't you doing it automatically? So this kind of context providers now are going to be built into the platform, and they will automatically populate the context. They already are doing it in the AAP, so you can test in the AAP. You will see that the context is populated dynamically in AI Assistant. And this way you get smarter responses. And the same with editing the files. AI Assistant will be writing to multiple files. So you get a patch, you can review it in a controlled way, and be able to integrate the suggested changes like in an efficient way, rather than just copying them one by one, which is tedious. It will be more like a Junie workflow, maybe not so automatic. So we see it actually runs tests and tries to fix them. That's nice. So at least our prompt worked, right? We tried that.
I'm not running all tests, it's running all the tests. Probably.
Yeah, all one by one, it seems.
Yes.
But, and it actually finished the workflow, but I think the tests are not passing. Let's see. Persistence layer was successfully implemented for the convex hull service using H2 database, while the application's functionality was verified and error-free. There were issues with the test configuration leading to the test failures.
I've seen it lie like that before.
Currently it's not lying. Actually, it tells you the application is functional, but the tests are failing, right? So I have seen it lying like that, saying that the application is functional and the tests are green. That's a lie, of course. But here it's honest. It's telling you that the tests are not running; they are failing. That's correct.
I'm saying that telling me that the application functionality is verified to be error-free and operational.
I see.
I mean, that's probably a lie, because how do you know? All it can do is run the tests.
Okay, and as we can see, it did not mark the tasks as completed, right? Database design, blah blah blah, persistence, because I wasn't very specific in my prompt. Like in the beginning, I just said proceed with phase 4, and that was a new session. In this session, I didn't specify anything about marking the completed tasks in the file and so on. So since it's not a standard functionality, kind of like keeping an external task list up to date, we gotta tell it all the time, or we gotta come up with a set of generic guidelines for this kind of workflow, and have this in the guidelines.md file as well. I don't have it in the guidelines.md file right now. Let's see. So I don't intend building this project to the very end. This is the first time we were doing, and I wanted to just demonstrate how I use this tool, like what is my process, like coming up with the guidelines, coming up with the plan, requirements, tasks, and so on. And then we can see that it works, but it's not super predictable. We have to be more precise on the instructions, and both probably in the guidelines as well. So I don't have like a very good recipe that works for everybody right now. This is something that we have to come up together as a society, probably. And yeah, this is the first time. We just wanted to collect your reactions, feedback, suggestions, what else to do. During the months, we probably will do this kind of sessions, like more of these sessions, and maybe on some different aspects of the workflows, like share more tips and tricks. We are really grateful to everybody for sharing your feedback on the Discord channel, of course, and don't hesitate to shout out to the team on the social media as well, and share what you have done and what worked for you, what didn't work for you. This is a great input for the team to develop the product further. I would like to wrap it up here, and if you have any suggestions to us for the next sessions, would be happy to hear your feedback.
Thank you very much.
Hope it was useful.